Welcome, Ahlan wa Sahlan. Because it has to do with, I think there's a lot of Egyptians in the room, so there is such a buzz already here tonight. I feel we're floating to the 4th floor already of the Frontline Club. What to say about Yosri Fouda? For many of us, he's an old friend. He's a fellow traveler. He's famous, very famous in Egypt, his native land. In fact, I challenge anyone to disagree with me. He is one of Egypt's top 2 television anchors. We won't say anything about Mona Shazli right now. Yosri Fouda doesn't just cover the news. He makes news. He is at times the news. With his program on ONTV, one of the big television channels in Egypt called The Last Word, he often does have the last word. And what great timing for Yosri. Do you remember, I saw you that day. You were just about to sign a contract at the start of the revolution with another television company, but you decided to stay. And what a good decision that was. For the last year and a half, he has been through every twist and turn of the extraordinary events that Egypt has been witnessing, including the 18 days of the revolution that didn't just change Egypt, but inspired the entire world. And everyone should have their Yosri moment. And so I have a Yosri moment, which I'm going to share with you. He's a very, very busy man, but he still values his friendship. So on day 1 of the 18 days, I asked him to come and do an interview with us on the 19th floor of our building of Arabic TV in Aguza in Cairo. And for me, I learned 2 things from that Yosri moment. One was, as we stood on the 19th floor, down below was a scene I shall never forget, which is at one end, there were the tanks and the troops, as they often are in Egypt. On the other end of the street, there were the protesters. But this was very different. This was police day, wasn't it? The protesters came forward, the troops came forward, hurling the tear gas. The protesters didn't go. They ran into the tear gas, picked up the canisters, and threw them back at the troops and police. And for me, that was the first real representation of that rallying cry, we have lost our fear. The tear gas went all the way up to the 19th floor, where I was interviewing Yosri live on BBC World Television. And the tears were streaming down his cheeks. Of course, he was very happy to see me, but it was actually the tear gas. And while we were on air, Yosri, being someone who doesn't mince his words, he goes, "Look at this tear gas." He said, "This is tear gas made in America." And of course, I just thought, right, and went on to the next question. I went down the 19th floor to our office, put on Twitter, and someone said, "Shame on you, Lyse Doucet. You didn't even challenge Yosri Fouda." And then, God bless Twitter. The guy says, "You didn't challenge him when he said this was made in America." And I'm thinking, oh God, I was such a bad journalist. Within a millisecond, someone else had put on Twitter a photograph of a tear gas canister, and what did it say? Made in America. Yosri Fouda was right. Yosri Fouda takes his journalism very seriously, but he is a journalist by accident. There he was, an academic way up in Glasgow, and the BBC was starting its Arabic service and needed some good Egyptians, some good people who speak Arabic, and there was Yosri Fouda, right place, right time. He joined the BBC. He was with the BBC, and when the BBC television folded, he then spent a year at the Associated Press, then went on to Al Jazeera. He then became an award-winning documentary maker and also a writer as well with his book, Masterminds of Terror. And I first met Yosri when he was working with BBC Arabic Television. He'd just come back from working in Bosnia with BBC Arabic Television, and he was working with Martin Bell. So, of course, when he came and joined us in Jerusalem, Yosri was wearing a white jacket and white trousers because he had just worked with Martin Bell. And we met at a Moroccan restaurant where Yosri then got up and started belly dancing. So he became, for me, Martin Belly.
Oh my God.
But Martin Belly is here tonight, lean, not mean, a journalist and a great journalist. Welcome. It's great to see you, Yosri. Please welcome Yosri Fouda.
Thank you. What an introduction. The best, except for one bit. But anyway, thank you so much, Lyse. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming this evening. I was just chatting with Vaughan Smith, the founder of this magnificent club. and John Owen, also a co-founder, and we were talking about that day when we were having a meeting when this place was nothing, and how much I missed it. The last time I was here was about like 4 years ago or so. So it means a lot to me to come back to the club. But at the same time, it comes at a time that upheaval across the whole region of the Middle East, not to mention, of course, Egypt. But in the beginning, since you mentioned my very first job as a journalist, that was with the BBC, World Service Arabic. And I'm saying this because my editor from the time, I'm so happy that he is here, Charles Richards.
Oh my God.
Charles, please.
Survive to tell the tale.
A big thank you for Charles for being here today. And I would like to, since you talked about this belly dancing thing, I have a little surprise for Lyse. Actually, this is a bit of the interview that we had on the 19th floor of the BBC interview. I don't know if you ever saw it, and I don't know if you ever knew what happened, because I didn't know until somebody actually surprised me on air.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it might be as surprising to you as it was surprising for me. Let's have a listen, Millicent, if you don't mind.
When I'm on the 19th floor of a building, and I can say everyone here on this roof is now wearing a mask because, and you can hear the coughing, because the tear gas is so powerful that it is wafted up here. And I can't tell you. Thank God it didn't contradict my story. It was 19 floors. Oh, thank God. Protesters running down right. I've never seen anything like Egypt before, waving their arms in the air, defying the riot police who've been coming at them. Dozens, I can see them over there with their vehicles in full riot gear. And the protesters are running towards the tear gas, picking up the tear gas with their hands, throwing it back at the riot police. We have never seen the war in Egypt. Let's just bring you, I'm going to bring in now Yosri Fouda, a prominent Egyptian journalist. Yosri, I know you're still suffering a bit from the tear gas, but just what we're seeing, you know, even here, and of course it's not just happened here, but across Cairo, just how unprecedented is it?
These are tear gas canisters made in the USA. And this, in my opinion, epitomizes the whole story of the Middle East for the last few decades. Washington that prepares...
Keep it running, keep it running.
This kind of regime...
Yeah, keep it running.
We seem to be having a few problems there with our line to Cairo.
Did you know that?
Nobody told me.
You know what?
But they came back to us. You were up there for hours with me.
Yeah, I think. What most people actually told me later is that that was a conspiracy theory, and that the BBC cut me off deliberately.
Really?
So you might like to ask.
We just
about
kept
that.
talking.
Well, I said to them, why would the BBC cut me off if they had the choice of not inviting me there in the first place? But they said maybe they didn't expect you to say that. It was shocking actually for many people to know that, you know. And I'd like to start from this point because that was the most important. That was the most.
But it was a
important
technical.
day.
But it was a technical problem, genuinely.
Yeah, I believe.
No. But believe me, it is genuinely.
That was on the 28th of January, 2011, and that is the most important day in the Egyptian Revolution. That was the so-called Friday of Wrath. The day when Mubarak and his interior minister's forces were defeated by the people. And because what happened later, actually, Lyse tempted me of hanging around there because, first of all communications were cut off. No mobile phones, no internet access, nothing. She said, she pulled her skirt up and say, you can have access to your email, and then pulled it up a little bit, and Facebook, and Twitter. So I hung around there. In the afternoon, there was a curfew. The army took to the streets. And I was supposed to have a panel that evening, including Robert Fisk and two Egyptian analysts, Mamoun Findi, who I brought to the office to be with you, and another guest. The two Egyptians didn't show up. I didn't expect anybody because there was a curfew anyway. The only one who showed up was Robert Fisk. I said, wow. So we spent the whole evening actually trying to get our correspondent. Only landlines worked sometimes. From then on, I was camped out in the media city. It's just outside of Cairo. And the real story began from that day on. Until, you know, everybody knows at the end of those 18 days, Mubarak just had to go. In the middle, they tried every trick in the book for the regime to remain intact, but then they decided that it was impossible and that Mubarak had to go. Again, in the middle, how much Washington played a role for or against, I'm not absolutely sure. But we were noticing mixed signals from Washington at the time, until Washington in the end decided, okay, Mubarak has to go, and we have to live with this fact. So that was just in...
But on that day we met, did you think in your mind, did you think it's possible that Mubarak will go in the same way that Ben Ali of Tunisia had gone?
I was on air when nobody knew where his airplane was.
Ben Ali?
Yes, that was on the 14th of January, and I had the ex-Egyptian ambassador to Washington, Ambassador Abdurraouf Ridi, and I had to apologize to him before the show because everybody knew that Ben Ali was no longer. He fled the country, and he was on his way somewhere. In the beginning, France, Cyprus, Saudi, we didn't know. So we spent the whole show actually trying to track where Ben Ali was going. It was a funny experience for us, you know. Who would you call for? But that was actually what brought the idea into the minds of everybody that it is doable. Certainly, the Ben Ali news was much bigger than Mubarak, because when this happens, that you can actually, a dictator can flee his dictatorship, his country, that easily. We didn't realize this. I'm talking about ordinary Arabs who had been living under tyrannies and dictatorships for so long. It was a game changer, and it was a wake-up call that it's doable. So, yeah, if you ask me personally, I always believe that no, it's you know, there's only one end for that. I also believe that most Egyptians believe that Mubarak will just have to go.
And who can forget that day, the February the 11th, and the euphoria across Egypt and the extraordinary, the nation almost seemed to rise up on that day when Egyptians made their own history. More than a year on, what do you say? Did Egypt have a revolution?
Yes, we still have a revolution. I do understand the frustrations of so many people inside Egypt and outside. This is a revolution. Revolutions take years and years. If you're talking about toppling the symbol of the regime or a few people around him, the trouble is that in time we came to realize that we have three main parties in Egypt, and each party has their own concept or understanding of what a revolution is, of what Egypt's revolution is all about or must be all about. The first force is the army, The second force is the Islamists, of course, led by the Muslim Brothers. And the third force is hardcore Tahrir Square, mostly secular forces. Young generation included, of course. For the army, it's basically about getting rid of the son, his mother, and their cronies, and maybe also the Habib al-Adli, the interior minister. I think that is basically the meaning of the revolution as far as the army is concerned. Later on, they had to sacrifice the father himself so that everybody can shut up. You know, he's in cage now. What do you want more than this? I think that was also from the beginning, the approach of the army towards what happened in Egypt. For the Islamists, it was about reaching the assembly and about putting your foot on track, and that's it, basically. We're going to take over from here. But for the hardcore revolutionary forces, and I'm not saying that Islamists are not revolutionary forces, they are, and they have been, except that they have their own understanding of where the actual revolution should end and should and a new phase should start. And that's the problem that we still have until today. And each of it's like a triangle. Each force has been waiting for the other two forces to fill out. In the beginning, the army divided the country through referendum, so it was a big battle between the young generation on the one hand and Islamists on the other hand, and then Islamists started just watching as the armies began killing young people in central Cairo, Mahmoud Street, and outside of the radio and TV building in Maspero and other places. And then it turned to the other two forces to be put against each other. So it's been going like in cycles with those three forces. End of story for me, actually, when everybody realizes that Egypt will never lend itself to only one force. And that's what we've been learning. Different parties have been learning this over time. And I think this learning process is going to remain with us for a long time to come. Egypt, for me, was, before the revolution, was like a house consisting of 5 or 6 rooms, and everyone was living in their own room, locked up, and they don't know who lives in the next room. Suddenly, something big happens that forces everybody out into the living room. And everybody's saying, who are you? That's exactly what happened. Liberals didn't know what Salafists were or how they thought and what this scary beard that they have and women in burqa. And those guys didn't know what a liberal is, infidels and traitors and the rest of it. And in between, other forces. In time, I claim that the one party that has learned most is the Salafists, in my opinion, so far. Maybe partly because they had to catch up with a lot, but at the same time, it was very important for other forces to begin to show sympathy with them for what they had been going through under Mubarak. But until today, every force still flirts with the idea that they can have all of Egypt. And this is going to take some time until we reach the point that, no, Egypt is big enough for everyone.
Well, it's a very good way to put it. I want to ask you about each of those three forces and what their ambitions are and how far they're going to go in this battle for power. But first of all, take us through some of the interviews that have made news in Egypt, because you have interviewed all of the people who matter there.
Yeah, that was very, just to help you, because this is a very noisy conversation, what I call a conversation. That was during the first 18 days of the revolution, when everybody was camped out in Tahrir Square and other Tahrir Squares around the country, the prime minister, who was appointed at the time by Mubarak in an attempt to contain the situation, who ended up being the presidential candidate running against who became the president later, Mohammed Morsi, is Brigadier General Ahmed Shafiq, close friend of Mubarak. They ended up in a show that I was co-hosting with Reem Magid next to me. We have 3 other characters so that you can understand what's going on, because it's very fast-paced. And next to Reem, you will find Ala al-Aswani, who's a great outspoken novelist and writer, a close friend of mine. Next to him, you'll find Mr. Hamdi Qandil, a very well-respected journalist in Egypt from the days of Nasser. Next to him is the owner of the channel, my ultimate boss, Naguib Sawiris, who's a Copt. And then, lastly, Brigadier General Ahmed Shafiq. We tried with my team to put some subtitles if you're fast enough to catch them because of the pace of the conversation. But this is a landmark, in my opinion, not only on the political side, but also on what media can do in our part of the world.
انت حر في تاريخك.
انا بس انا
واخد بالك، انما انا بقول لحضرتك ما تقوليش
مش
البس دور وطنيه. انا بقول لك الناس ماتت. الناس طب عملت ايه الناس اللي ماتت؟ عملت ايه؟ جاري التحقيق بقاله شهر.
يا باشا شهرين.
لا ما ينفعش.
روح عند النائب العام شوف
ما ينفعش.
ما ينفعش. انت بتنام في بيتك. النائب العام ما بينامش.
انا ما بنامش في بيتك، انت اللي بتنام في بيتك.
النائب العام ما بينامش.
انت اللي بتنام في بيتك.
ممكن لا كل حاجه ليها اصول.
لا
انا يعز عليا دكتور علاء،
كل حاجه ليها اصول.
ما ينفعش تتكلم.
انا يعز عليا جدا، انا يعز عليا جدا الجزء
اوعى
الاخير.
تنسى انا ورايا التاريخ قبل ما انت تتولد.
بص
لا
المزايدة على الوطنية.
دكتور علاء لو سمحت يا دكتور علاء
ما ينفعش تقول لي البس وطنيه، ده انت اللي مرفوض.
يعني ايه انا عارف دكتور علاء لو سمحت، هل ده معنى ذلك؟
ده مش بني ادم،
ده يمنع،
ده مش بني ادم.
وماله ده بني ادم؟
لو ابنك اتداس بعربيه كنت هتقول كده؟
يا سيدي اتفضل يا علاء. واللي قاعد في
لا
الجدال
ما تقولش البس وطنيه.
الحماس
لا ده مش كده على حاجه.
دكتور علاء
لا ده مش كده على حاجه. انت اللي فاهم غلط. انت اللي فاهم غلط.
كله كلام غلط.
انت اللي كلامك غلط.
دكتور علاء ارجوك.
He resigned after that.
Yes.
Yes, he resigned. That was the result. He got the prime minister had to go.
Actually, a few hours later. And
Two months after, I think, because 2 months after. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
They invaded the security services in Nasr City the day after, because it was
No.
after he resigned. Yes, I'm sure, because my son was in Nasr City and all that took place. It was before. It wasn't in April.
Unless you have another one because that's famous, Ala Aswani and Shafi, where he was so embarrassed by it he had to step down. Yeah, he's resigned. Yes, he resigned after. Okay.
I can't remember the exact date, but but anyway, that actually I was stunned actually when I was woken up in the morning. Somebody telling me, one of my colleagues, that he's gone.
Not Allah, but the other one is.
But I would like to, if I can comment on one thing here, is for the first time in the history, in our history, in our part of the world, because so many people were shocked with the way Ala handled the situation, Ala al-Aswani. It was basically about the idea of accountability. And that's, in my opinion, what the whole revolution is all about. People wanted justice and accountability. And Dr. Aswani he's the one person in the whole of the Arab world who knows what this word actually means. And that's why he really gave it to Ahmed Shafiq. But so many people surprisingly hated Ala for it because it shocked them. It shocked them into reality. And I watched the show like 6 or 7 times later on to try and spot one indecent single word that Ala might have used, and I didn't find any. So it was all about the attitude that Ala was so adamant to put it forward. That I'm not going to be intimidated by the fact that you are a powerful guy. I'm not going to be intimidated culturally by the fact that you are an elderly, because we respect this in our culture. And so many people had this comment to say, but he's like your father. And just before the show, because Ala was watching Shafiq with my colleague Reem before we went into the studio, every time Ala heard Shafiq saying to one of the other guests, hey, I'll make you understand, you're just like my son. And Ala hits the roof. See, that's what's all about. That's what they are trying to, patronize us and so that we can respect them and forget about how the country should be run, and they can get away with it. So that's the main idea that I would take from a conversation like this.
But the extraordinary thing is then he came back and ran again to be the next president of Egypt, and almost became it. Now this is an interview with Morsi and
that's
and Amr Musa,
after the first round, Egyptians were, most Egyptians I would say, were found themselves in an awkward position, having to choose between basically Mubarak or Islamists. Because you've ended up with Morsi and Shafiq. And because of so many factors, I don't think we have time to discuss them now. That was the choice in front of them. Next thing that happened after they announced the results of the first round, Dr. Morsi calls our show and offers to give us the first interview. Now, again, linked to the very idea of accountability, I showed him some excerpts from newspapers before the revolution about how the Muslim Brothers behaved in one way or another. Of course, I have every sympathy with what happened to them in Mubarak's prison and in Sadat's prison and in Nasser's prison. They've been chastised, and they are the party that really suffered most, them and all Islamists, of course. But again, I'm bringing into question the idea whether or not he or anybody else really understands what accountability is. Oh, that's not the one. That's the debate. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
اسمحوا لي أن أعيد الترحيب مرة أخرى بالدكتور محمد مرسي الذي هو الآن غير كونه رئيسا لحزب الحرية والعدالة، هو المرشح الذي خرج من الجولة الأولى وهو يكمل مضمار السباق أمام مرشح آخر هو الفريق أحمد شفيق.
المصريون جميعا بالنسبة لي كرئيس جمهورية ولائي لهم بعد الله سبحانه وتعالى طبعا ولأرض مصر، والكل متساوون في الحقوق وفي الواجب.
من واجبي أيضا أن أضع أمام حضرتك ما نشرته جريدة المصري اليوم يوم 25/11/2010. حضرتك قلت محمد مرسي مسؤول لجنة الانتخابات في الإخوان، ننسق في دوائر مع الوطني، الحزب الوطني يعني، والتجمع والوفد، ولدينا تفاهمات مع الأمن ما بين قوسين، رفضنا الدفع بمرشحين
صحيح
أمام عزمي وغالي وعلام وبالنجا احتراما لهم.
هذا الكلام في حينه أنا اعترضت عليه، وأنا مش عايز ناخد جريدة من الجرايد على أنها مصدر من مصادر التشريع. الجرايد بعضها يصيب أحيانا ويخطئ أحيانا كثيرة أخرى، وهذا الكلام في حينه أنا اعترضت عليه جدا لأنه لم يعبر عما قلت ولم يكن صحيحا في مجمله ولا في تفصيله.
Okay, I think there was another piece, but Dr. Morsi, I've known him for a long time. He's a kind man by nature. He really is a kind man. But a kind man, of course, with a project. He's part and parcel of the Muslim Brothers, even though he announced that he resigned from the party that of which he was the president, Al-Hurriya wal-Adala, Freedom and Justice Party, the Muslim Brother political arm, as well as from the Muslim Brotherhood group itself. In my opinion, there's no such a thing as an ex-Muslim brother. Once a Muslim brother, always a Muslim brother. But having said this, if you look at the couple of weeks since he became president, he tried to bring everybody together. I think he managed to send the right messages concerning the main issues. Whether or not this is going to be the case a year from now, for instance, I'm not really absolutely sure. So many people don't trust Muslim Brothers. There certainly is a huge war orchestrated in the eyes of many by the so-called deep state, meaning the remnants of the regime, the mukhabarat, security forces, intelligence apparatus, the media, society in Egypt, most of it at least. Some try to be fair and professional, but the overall atmosphere now is that there is a war, and that partnership, or at least understanding between SCAF or the army on the one hand and the Muslim Brothers in Egypt is not there to last for long anyway.
And what is your measure of him now? You say you've known him a long time. A number of Egyptian journalists said that the man who started out as the reserve candidate, they called him the tire, spare tire, because when Shatter couldn't run. And then suddenly when he won, people started saying, oh, did we underestimate him? He goes to Tahrir Square and gets sworn in by the people. He tries to shun the protocol. And then day one, he then says that I dispute the judgment of the Constitutional Court. The Parliament must come back. What is your measure of him now? What do you talk about the Muslim Brotherhood project? What is Morsi's project now? What do you see as his next moves? Is he going to continue to defy the army? Because as you know, what he's doing is controversial.
They're getting used to the palace first. It's going to take time for him personally to get used to the idea that he's president of Egypt. I mean, it's just like, who would have even imagined that? I mean, in some chapters of this story can really shock you into things. I live in a suburb in Cairo that was built by the Brits a long time ago in Maadi in southern Cairo, which also houses the military hospital to which Mubarak was transferred from the prison. And on that day, well, a couple of days after he was transferred to the hospital, Morsi took the oath in the Constitutional Court, which is almost wall by wall. I mean, it took me a while actually just looking at this fact. Morsi, who was in Mubarak's prison, and Mubarak now is in hospital dying, and before he dies, he's seeing it all in front of his eyes. And next door to him, the guy who he put in prison has taken the oath to become Egypt's next president. It's amazing. It's just amazing. And that's why, you know, every time I meet...
Sitting at Mubarak's desk that day when he went and sat in his desk.
Yeah, every time I come across an Egyptian who is so frustrated, who says that I've lost hope or something like this, we're a little bit emotional, as I'm sure most of you guys know. We tend to forget these huge steps. We take them for granted. We expect more and more and more. Yeah, fine, but you know, who would have even imagined that? Before one day, actually 1 hour before the revolution started, and nobody knew it was going to be a revolution on the 25th of January anyway, including the people who took to the streets. They didn't know that this was going to be a revolution. Half an hour before it,
our utmost dream was to change the interior minister. Could they do it? Could actually Habib al-Adli be toppled aside and somebody else comes and puts us in prison instead? That was our every time I spoke to a revolutionary, they would say to me that was a far-fetched dream. And everybody was bracing themselves that Gamal was coming anyway. He's the next president. Everybody, colleagues of and friends of mine who come from, foreign press, whether from Europe or from America, they came to interview Mubarak and to see Gamal. They had to see Gamal and things like this. And the whole country was geared in that direction. So we've done a lot in the space of a year and a half, and that gives me heart that it can only get better from now. But it's going to be a roller coaster. Yes, it's going to be a roller coaster for now, and we're going to have a lot of problems. But you've just made a revolution. What do you expect?
But what do you expect in terms of the dance between the triangle? What is on Mohammed Morsi? Is he going to be his own man? Is he going to defy the military, make deals, backroom deals, as they are suspicious, people suspect, with the military?
That's a
How will he bring on the liberals, who are still very upset about what he did with the Constitutional Court, with the decision?
Yeah. The thing is, to be fair to the guy, a lot of his powers were taken away through a constitutional declaration by the army just before he became president. They saw it happening, and I think, I believe, like many believe in my country, that that was done in anticipation. And that actually in partly explains why the messy way with the announcement of the second round. It's so complex. The situation is so complex because some people who I know very well are staunch believers in freedoms and in democracy. They turn a blind eye. They say, yeah, it's good that the declaration is there. We don't know what those guys are going to. I mean, you can't really believe in if you really believed in free choice of the people and in democracy, then I expect you to voice your objection to something like this. A president should have their power, and otherwise, you can't really hold them to account. So that's the situation now. It's a power game. What we are seeing now at this very moment in Egypt is a power struggle. It's not. It's one facet of the revolution, and the revolution itself is taking its own course. And I'm really heartened by the fact that there is a new generation in Egypt. By a new generation, I don't only mean the young people, even their fathers, who suddenly woke up. It's amazing, really amazing. The Egyptian character is changing, and it's changing fast. The culture itself is changing. In answer to your question, I think it's down to every party itself. Anyone now who can, first of all, show tolerance and try to do something about the main feature of what's happening now in Egypt, which is polarization. Egypt is so polarized at the moment. And
Can you elaborate?
It's it's linked to the idea that we're going through a learning process. The Salafists are still discussing even a single word in the constitution, whether it's going to be the principles of Islam or the rulings of Islam or just Islam. And that's you're talking about Article number 2 in the Constitution, identity of Egypt, how it's gonna look like, and everybody would like their own Egypt to be out there. Don't start by blaming one party. I really appreciate that he loves Egypt that much, that he wants Egypt to be the way he sees it, and sees it is the key word here. Do we see Egypt the right way or not? What's going to be best for Egypt and for the whole region? That concept has developed a lot over time, over a year and a half. But
I give it like at least 5 years before you begin to see more tolerance and more understanding that you know, you don't have to be in love with someone to share a house with. That idea is not there yet.
Let's bring up some questions from the House. And perchance, don't forget there's a microphone. Yes, gentleman here. Please say who you are.
Yes,
yeah.
Noel.
No, microphone, please.
Sorry. Noel Rand's British Egyptian Society. We talk about the Mubarak regime, yet so many people say that Mubarak wasn't a man of great intellect. So was it his regime, or was he merely a figurehead?
A bit of both, in my opinion. Remember that he was chosen by Sadat to be his vice president because Sadat was an intelligent man who didn't want an intelligent man next to him. Okay. And I remember the front page of the Washington Post on the 7th of October, 1981. That was the morning after the assassination of Sadat. Of course, you see the picture of Sadat dead. And a little column, who's going to succeed him. I can't remember the exact line, but I remember very well that they say Hosni Mubarak, blah, 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 better known as Lavashkiri. Because that's what we used to call him, Lavashkiri, because all what he did under Sadat was stand, you know, in the picture, appear in the picture, like Lavashkiri. That's what Egyptians are, you know, we like.
The laughing cow
that's
cheese.
What, actually, you know, the most important weapon of resistance in the hands of Egyptians across all ages is joking. And we're very good at joking, and it really hurt. Nasser wept. One of my sources told me that he wept more than once at listening to some of the jokes that were being told about him. So, yes, he came to the country after Sadat, and if I am to describe his 30 years, the longest actually in the history of Egypt, modern history of Egypt, of course, it's basically, I would call it the age of do nothing. That's what he believed in. Do nothing, you'll be okay. He did nothing, nothing. Domestically, regionally, and internationally. That's that's why I was one of the people actually who were for the idea when his trial started. I said, don't try him for what he did. Try him for what he did not do. So by the time he had to go, of course, there's a regime under him, which actually in the last 5 or 6 years, he was rather marginalized by his son and his wife and their cronies, and they were preparing for the inheritance project. Well, should this actually encourage me to not to blame him because he was sidelined? Of course not. He was there. He didn't do anything about it. And we are still suffering. Actually, I wrote on Twitter today something that's to do with Syria, because Syria had big news today. And I said, I hear, you know, diplomatically now, you know, I hear the names of almost every single country in the world in the context of trying to find a way out for Syria, except for the name of Egypt. This is a disaster. In my opinion, it's a disaster, and it is. Actually, I attribute it to the do-nothing era of Mubarak, that marginalized the role of Egypt regionally and left it where we are now. It was Monsieur Bonaparte in the 19th century who said that the national security of Egypt starts in Syria, and everybody knows that across history, every time that Egypt and Syria were close to each other, they managed to do a lot, and that is what would, by all means, of course. So, not to even be mentioned in the context of Syria now, with all what's happening there, that's, in my opinion, this is a catastrophe for Egypt, and that's the thing that many Egyptians feel strongly about. During the revolution, when Nabil al-Arabi, for a few weeks, became Egypt's foreign minister, he managed, because of his charisma and his understanding of the importance of the role of Egypt internationally and regionally, he managed to bring Egypt back very quickly, in a matter of few days, back into the picture. And people started to, until it was played that no, he can't stay as a foreign minister. So they gave him the Arab League.
Did you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming here. And really, for people who do not speak Arabic, Yosri Fouda has got one of the most eloquent Arabic texts presented in any news channel. I have to disagree with...
Tell us who you are, please. Sorry, your name, please.
My name is Hazem Al-Rafai. I'm here. I just wanted to mention that there is a huge oversimplification for the Egyptian revolution. And in reality, one should start with two starting points, President Sadat and Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice proposed the concept of constructive chaos in the region. And I think the constructive chaos has embraced the Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam in the region. And what we are witnessing today is the destruction of the almost every single equation in the region, the destruction of the state of Iraq, almost destruction of the state of Syria, and the state of Egypt is on the verge of collapse on the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood and under the slogans of political Islam. And I am not really as optimistic as you describe, because one of the examples you are referring to is what's happening in Syria. It is a tragedy that Egypt has no view, no word about what's happening in Syria. But we forget that the blood is dropping from the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood groups in Syria, which is an insurrection completely incited by the CIA and the British government.
Okay.
Do you want to think about that for a minute?
Now, thank you for the points that you made. You made many points. I'm not really sure. I don't claim to be an expert on Syria. I've been really overwhelmed by the Egypt story for the last year and a half. But of course, I've been following the situation, but only to a degree. Before I begin thinking about Condi Rice or the American position or the Western position, if we are to enlarge the scope, before I think about us internally, and what's been happening, and I can't really find it in my heart to blame somebody else before I blame our regimes and what they have been doing, and I can't blame America or anyone indeed for this matter, that they are after their own interests. Everybody has the right to go after their own interests. Now it's down to you to also define where your interests lie. As a citizen, as just a normal citizen, an ordinary citizen who happen to be Egyptian, I'm interested in very seemingly simple concepts like justice, equal opportunity, the rule of law. That's the real thing. The first thing that people shouted in Tahrir Square and in Libya and in Tunisia and in Syria is just bread, dignity, and justice. And the real fight now in Egypt is all about the rule of law, whether or not we are going to go that way. And those in the middle, crushed in the middle between the military and the Islamists, because these are the two most powerful entities in Egypt now. They are after this, basically.
We'll take a question in the back and then a question in the front.
Hi, I'll stand up so you can see me. My name's Alan Francis. I work on the Middle East desk for a human rights organisation. I focus primarily on Egypt at the moment. I want to talk to you about religious freedom. So I was there in April and met with lots of religious minorities, not ethnic minorities, but religious minorities, particularly the Copts, people from the Baha'i community and Sufi Muslims, and there was increasing worry of how they have been treated under Mubarak, but also with the potential of a Muslim Salafi government president. What's your thoughts on how? And one thing they made it clear to me that they didn't want to be treated any different. They are indigenous Egyptians, you know, there before even the Muslims in the country, but they wanted to be treated equally. How do you see that playing out with the new government?
Right. Well, it's a very good question, and it's a very worrying issue for so many people, including myself, by the way. It's not only about minorities being freaked out. And that's basically the nature of the beast, of the phase that we are going through now. That's why I always start with tolerance and trying to understand where the others come from and why they would think about this and why the Salafis are so interested in the constitution and what to put in the constitution. Well, we had a very good, by the way, we had a very good constitution under Mubarak, except for only one article that had to do with the powers of the president. But other than this, it was a wonderful constitution. But was it translated into laws and into law enforcement and into, the overall rule of law in the country? No. So I'm not really too much bothered about what's going to be written there and what's not. But I do share your concerns and the people that you have met. But I wouldn't really ascribe to the theory that they were under Mubarak. Everybody was basically played with, and religion was used for political, ends, and nobody really believed that there was what we call fitna ta'ifiyya or sectarian fitna in Egypt, especially the Copts. The Copts in particular, they panicked, and I don't blame them, when suddenly found, it's either Shafiq or Morsi. And most Copts are, of secular nature in Egypt, and they're very progressive, pro-democracy. They had to vote for Shafiq. I don't know, I don't judge anyone. But everybody panicked. But why, including myself, I'm an Egyptian, Muslim, Sunni, right? I too have the same fears. It's not only about Copts or Baha'is or Shiites or Sufis. It's the main idea. It's the role of law. I don't want anyone to teach me my religion. You're not here to teach me my religion as a president. You're here to serve me. This is the idea. And that's what people, who really, get to the crunch and not allow details to swamp the picture and the way they think about it, stick to this idea. You can be whatever you like. You can be a Muslim brother, a Salafi, a Sufi, and everybody should be respected. But politics is a different game. If I elect you, if I give you my vote, I'm giving you my vote, not because I want you or I need you to teach me my religion or any other religion. It's because I want you to serve me.
Do you want to know?
Yeah, I mean, with such, it's very hard to formulate so many questions because there's
the recording,
so much we're trying to put into it. But you were saying earlier about these three, at least, the triangle. We have seen during those 18 days a capacity to be so united. We have seen this capacity that we all know in a mulid or we're a mass culture, and we can actually unite in a way that shook everybody who watched it, while for us it had this natural effect of being able to be so united. How can we be facing such a fragmentation in a sense of identity? What do you think, how come we cannot find what we hold dear as Egyptians? Why am I not managing, as you say, to find the tolerance to accept? How can we move as media, or I'm Amira Ghazala, I'm work in culture. How can we move towards that? How can we find what we hold dear, what we can all agree on? What do you think?
Well, to start with, again, I go to the same concept, rule of law. Everybody's equal in front of the law, and you make sure that the law is applied to everyone. That's what this whole thing is all about.
The law's fragmenting.
Yeah, well, it's going to take some time to change the culture first and the mentality. Because, like, and I said about the Constitution was there and was beautiful. But how you applied this in reality was a different story. Now, you are trying to aspire. I will be endorsing anyone if the people voted for them and if they wanted them. Our problem is that, don't forget a few facts. You're talking about a country, the third of which at least cannot even read or write, okay? And those who are below poverty line, almost exactly the same, even more. And
So
that could easily no. I'm sorry, no, it does work. If you wanted it to work, no, you start. This is the real revolution, and I don't mean you when I say that I'm sick and tired of people who say, well, Omar Suleiman, the guru of the Egyptian intelligence, said it was Christiane Amanpour, I think, during those 18 days, and when she asked him the same question. He said, democracy, but he win. Egyptians are not ready for it. Well, I mean, that's, no. This is the excuse used over and over again by people who don't want you to have it, that you're not ready yet. I'm going to, and again, the accountability and the patronization thing, you're not ready yet. I will decide for you when you are ready. So, part of the revolution, and this is what I'm trying to encourage through my personal contacts or indeed on my show, is to realize the real revolution. Of course, what's been happening or the power struggle, and it's part of it, but what's more important in my opinion is working on the ground and trying to raise the awareness of people, try to open the doors for people, and don't take the first voting, by the way, the referendum or the parliament as an indication, because that was exceptional. Yeah.
But you can't say that we've had really a vote that represents the thought in Egypt, the people, what people really want. You can't say that.
I'm sorry, you have to accept the fact that what I mentioned. One third of your country cannot even read or write. You have to accept this fact and deal with it. Let's. I know that you were. This is the thing with Egypt, is that it's so diverse, but it's a country that has suffered a lot, and we have to accept the facts on the ground. This is the country. So if an Islamist knocks on the door of a poor, illiterate old lady and gives her a bottle of oil or a kilo of sugar or something like that, like Islamists are usually accused of, would you actually find it in your heart to blame her for not taking the right choice and think of the constitution and things? I'm sorry. You have to deal with the facts.
Okay, yes, because I feel then we need as well, like if they tell me Hizb Noor is going to hold the Ministry of Education, for example, it's very hard for me to see that this process that you're talking about of being able to actually reach a state where we can think and communicate. It is very hard to be observing.
I totally understand your fears. Yes, I totally understand your fears, but this is not. It's been already answered. It's not going to happen that the Salafists will control certain ministries. There is this dialogue happening now. It's taking place. Be part of it, but be part of it, understanding at the same time where the others come from. Why? Because everybody has their own fears. Not only you, also the Salafists. They have their own fears, and they have gone through. They have gone through a lot. Just to add to this before I hand over to you, Lyse. You can divide Egypt, another way of looking at dividing Egypt. You can draw a line between two kinds of Egypt now. The Egypt that's driven by hope and the Egypt that's driven by fear. And there's a huge difference between the two motives. huge difference. Hope takes you to better land sooner or later. Fear, even though it's a much stronger instinct, will land you in trouble later. It's just like, you know, it's. I'm not talking about you in person, by the way. Generally in Egypt, that's the situation. Like, for instance, those three forces that constitute the triangle that I talked about, the army is definitely driven by fear. Young people in the street are driven by hope. The Islam is sometimes by this or that.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back. Yep.
My question is about the role of the media. I think recently you have suspended your program twice. The first time I think might be because of the SCAF. The second time might be because of your boss, Mr. Sawiris, and their influence. How can we get to a more fair, professional, and neutral kind of media in our country, especially after you comment about how media is very powerful, and it was one of the main factors that Shafiq was stepped down from being a prime minister at a certain point.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question, of course, and of course it's a personal one because I'm part of that community in Egypt. And we've been struggling a lot, whether under Mubarak or indeed after the revolution. What I can tell you that we have multiple channels, not only talking about TV channels, but ways of that, and more people have realized that we are living in a different age now. That even if you shut me up, I can launch my own channel from my bedroom. More than one channel, actually. I can go back to Al Jazeera. I can come to London and still, you know, reach even more people. I think they do know this now, and that helps people like myself tremendously. And I try to use this for every small value that I believed in from the beginning. And that's why when I had to, but only when I really had to suspend my program, it was for, you know, a reason that I truly believed in. And the first time, like you mentioned, it had to do with the army and the way that they wanted to control the situation, and I didn't want for that to happen. And the second time was immediately after the announcement of the first round presidential elections. And there was panic basically in the channel, and it's actually in credit to the administration that they admitted this later, and they said yes, we lost it during those few days. All of Egypt panicked during that period of 4 or 5 days. Everybody panicked, and I wanted to steady the ship, and I couldn't. So I had to announce that I wasn't part of that, in respect to my viewers. And I didn't want to take part, and I will never take part in a situation like this. But having at the same time announced my understanding why, you know, some people panicked or feared things more than others. The situation can only get better from. I expect it to get a little bit worse before it gets better. With all the, again, it's not. You're not talking about you know, one side of the society that's there. It's there. It's part and parcel of what's happening. The media is part of the scene. We're not only. I mean, with all due respect to what we've learned, and you know, the BBC and things like, you know, we're human beings, and I know that my convictions drive me most of the time, but at the same time I do acknowledge this, and I try to be a good boy and at least give everybody an equal opportunity. Naguib Sawiris, who's the owner of the channel, my ultimate boss, when he clicked share on Twitter on a drawing Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse with a beard and Minnie Mouse with a burqa, And later on, he apologized, I can't remember, 5, 6 times. But it's not over yet, and I don't think he will recover from it for a long time. The level of tolerance is not exactly there yet, and we have to accept this fact, and we have to encourage people to, And when he insisted on appearing on my show, I said, fine, okay, but I'll get you a Salafist, and I gave him the platform, the Salafist, and he chastised my boss, and I said, no word, and I said to him, apologize. How many times have you apologized? He said 5. I said, okay, this is the 6th time. Say sorry. He said, I'm sorry. I said, no. Look into the camera and say sorry. Did I actually want anybody? I mean, it's not the fact that he's my boss has nothing to do with that. It just happened to be. Did I really mean that? No. It's just because I understand that the society is going through this phase. Show some tolerance, some understanding of what might hurt others. This is the way this is. Maybe someone like yourself, I say, hey, it's a nice joke. It's so what's the big deal? Another, if he felt hurt, you can't tell people what should hurt or what shouldn't. What hurts, hurts. There's no place here for should or shouldn't. They felt hurt, then you have to show understanding for that. Until we reach a little bit more of, sanity thing.
Don't you think that among those who are called so-called nukhba, or the elitists, don't you think that they do not understand what democracy means?
Yeah, well, many of them, I don't know this. I don't really like this word nukhba or elite or something like this. But and certainly many Egyptians don't like the word anyway. But Egyptians, any people, and nothing really particular about Egyptians here, they can tell whether or not you are an honest guy. Even if they didn't agree with you, they will still respect you.
Okay, we're getting quite a lot of questions, so I'm going to start taking, there's 2 in the back that were there,
Yes.
this woman, and I think there's another one in the back there, or there's this woman here. So let's take 2 more from the back. This woman here with the white shirt on the end, and then a woman with the white shirt inside. And we'll take those 2, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stand because I'm short.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. I wasn't sure whether you were waving the pen. Yeah, okay.
I'm Noha Abu Dahab. I'm a PhD student at UCL here, and I'm researching the prosecution of political leaders in the Arab region. And I noticed that you mentioned a few times that this revolution is about accountability. And I was wondering what exactly you meant, well, like what sort of accountability? You mean accountability in the courts? Accountability for crimes committed during the uprising, or for crimes committed in the last 5 or 6 decades? You see there's this trend throughout the region right now of trying former leaders for crimes that have been committed, both economic crimes and human rights crimes. And in Tunisia, for example, you have the nationalists like the Yusufiyin from way back in the 50s that are now filing complaints for crimes that were committed against them. You have the Islamists who suffered during the 80s as well, filing complaints. So I just wonder, like, what sort of accountability exactly you're talking about. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just pass it along. So the accountability question. Yes, please.
My name is Shama Nouh. And I was wondering, speaking about laws and Muslim Brotherhood, aren't you afraid that Muslim Brotherhood will become another NDP in Egypt?
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
okay. First, on the accountability thing. Accountability is a concept in the absolute. I don't mean by it holding those people who are still in power or who were there before the revolution. It's a concept that we have been thriving for. But of course, it does include everything that you've mentioned. And we have, one of the things that I've observed in Egypt, because I was lucky to have been away from the country for so many years before the revolution. I went back to the country 1 year before the revolution. Like many people who noticed that there was something happening, but we didn't know exactly how it was going to end. And one of the things that I noticed, having gone back to the country, that some Egyptians started using the term, I'm a taxpayer. That wasn't it. Serious. You know, we laugh at it, we think it's a joke. That's a very serious indicator of how things are developing now in Egypt. Now you walk, before the revolution, you walked in the street, you found a police officer, and you say, oh my God, and you turn the other way, and I say, Rabbana yastur, God be. Now it's different. Now it's actually, you try to show some understanding and encourage them to work, because you have already defeated them and now they are broken, and it's your responsibility now to say, you know, one or two nice words to them. What? That is just like, you know, 180 degrees change in 1 second. So that's the broader meaning of the word that I meant. As for the Muslim brothers, am I afraid of what? Whether or not they could turn into another NDP? Yes, they could try too. And you are there, you can make another revolution. But you don't have to make another revolution so long as you are aware of this fact, of this possibility. If enough people like yourself are aware of this possibility, you will put the mechanism that will ensure that this will never happen again. So another reason for me to feel good about it is that to hear somebody like yourself, you know, drawing our attention towards, flag it out.
If they're not enough? If they're not enough?
I think they are growing. I think the number is growing. I think more and more people, even those who can't read or write, go to a village now in Egypt and see. Maybe they would watch one of those programs that try to give them lies and rumors and a certain version of events and the rest of it. But believe you, when they vote, they vote. See how Egyptians punished Islamists later on, after the first election. You know, what's the weight of Muslim brothers? With all due respect to them, they are an integral force of Egyptian society that you have to accept, and you have to learn how to live with them. This is your own people. You just can't. But at the same time, you look at the fact, in my opinion, it's what Dr. Morsi, now President Morsi, got in the first round, not the second round. You got 23, 24%. That's the maximum that the most organized force on the ground in Egypt could mobilize with all the funding. You know, some suggest, you know, huge funding, and all the manpower that they put into that, and they only manage 24%. Okay? Now, this is their true power. It's neither good or bad news. It only tells you that this power exists. If you want to do something about it, if you want to play politics, then we should learn politics. Do you want to organize yourself like they have been doing? They've acquired a lot of experience underground work because of their own experience, and you haven't. You know, it amazes me every now and then that, you know, people just blame the Islamists for winning here or winning there and things like this. The people want them. If the people want them, khalas, the people want them. You can make the people want you.
Yes. Well, in spite of all you are trying to say and trying to convince us that we should trust the Islamists and give them
I'm not. You can trust or distrust
or give them a chance.
Like.
Or give them a chance. This is what you are saying. This is what everyone in the intelligentsia or the so-called politically correct intelligentsia in Egypt is now saying. The problem is that we know them too much. We have lived with them. I, as a Democrat Egyptian woman, I can accept very well that my neighbors grow beards, that they live the way they want to live, and that the women wear niqab. But all I want is to have the right to go on living the way I want. I don't want anyone to impose on me a religious state or tell me that I am an apostate because I don't dress or follow their ways. This is the greatest fear. I mean, so they need to abide by the rules of democracy. Everyone needs to, and this is what they are not doing. I mean, they have that double discourse. They say something to the American and the Western media, even the Egyptian media, and they're in their own channels, in their internal discussions, they say a totally different thing. I speak Arabic. I watch their channels. You know what they say in their channels. So this is what scares me.
Yeah, well, and I understand why you're scared about this.
And what about women and what they are doing? And all they actually immediately the day after Morsi was elected, they just killed a boy while he was with his fiancée, and he showed his ring. It was absurd. Can a man just say, no, you're not married, you cannot go around, with your fiancée? It's absurd. I mean, it's out.
Okay.
Unimaginable.
Okay. Let's not mix things up together. It wasn't a Muslim brother who did this. It's, the situation is so complicated, and you can't just. Do you want to be in a lump sum in one category? People, Islamists would call you. I don't know, a rotten infidel, liberal. I don't know what this is. No, I wouldn't like for anybody to categorize me, and I would like people to know me and to judge me should they judge me on what I do. Now, you've mentioned a certain situation with this guy. There was people who were thought to be Salafists. They said in a certain way or something. Again, we have a lot to learn yet. And if you cannot concede the fact, if you cannot accept the fact that we all go through the ballot and whoever comes out of it will deserve our respect, then you're working against yourself. It's painful, especially now that you are coming out of so many years of ignorance and corruption. It's hard to accept, I know, and it invites all reasons for worry and for fear. I acknowledged all of this, but you can't start your road towards democracy by being a dictator. Because I'm sorry, the way I understand your fears that can't we do something about it? No, they shouldn't be in power because blah, 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 blah. No, if you accept democracy, then you accept democracy. You want to do something about it, then you dig deep into your society until the society is mature enough to really... to be fair to them, until now I haven't found a single statement or declaration or out there in your eyes declared intention that they are going to do anything of this. Now, it's all about trust or distrust. It's not exactly about something that they have done or said that they were going to do. They even conceded in the constitution. Muslim brothers, they are very pragmatic, by the way. Salafists are rather emotional, and understand the way, and they are rather pure. When you approach every party and you talk to them in the language that they would understand, they would appreciate it to you, and they would begin to understand your fears as well. And in the end, you will arrive at,
We'll meet next year here, and you'll see what this gentleman here.
Hi, Yosri. You've always talked about accountability in three parts. Well, the three powers that are currently the revolutionaries, the military, and the Muslim Brotherhood. But it's also with the different departments in the government. So the different ministries, the parliament, and an independent judiciary. And how they're actually struggling together. And actually not just compete, but to work together. So I'd like to ask you to elaborate on the struggle at the moment.
Yeah.
But equally because I met Mohamed Morsi last year. And aside from, I'm a Copt, so aside from disagreements that I have, which fair enough, his foreign policy always also seemed a bit aggressive. And I don't know if you felt the same.
Aggressive in what way?
He was in Oxford doing a talk, and it felt like he couldn't wait to get into a political argument with Israel. He kept on mentioning the peace agreement and kept on mentioning how they've been constantly breaking it. I don't necessarily mean anything aggressive militarily, but how is he going to argue with the army if they're getting aid from the US directly? They're getting all this power on their own, and he's the president, and he also has a foreign minister.
Okay.
Okay. You know, one of the phenomenon in politics, and it also applies to the situation in Egypt, even though just getting the first taste of it all, is that don't believe much of what is usually said before the elections. Okay. The situation, if you want to talk about their position as far as the Israelis are concerned, for instance, and the Americans, I'm sure that was one of the very first things that they had already agreed on. Okay, and I have no doubt about this. I don't have evidence, but I have no doubt about something like this. Now, you study their statement and the rest of this, no, this is not, and I believe them. This is not their priority. Could that file be opened at a certain point or another in the future? Yeah, of course, could be. All possibilities are there, but I'm not going to be worried about bridge number 4 or 5 before I have to deal with the first bridge. What history tells us about Islamists and Muslim brothers in particular is that they are very pragmatic, and that they can discuss things. And you can arrive at deals with them. Actually, some people accuse them of making deals. Some people actually thank them for being able to strike deals, depending on the way you look at it. The issue, again, to sum it all up over and over again, because I've noticed that most of the questions deal with the same notion, but from different angles with different meanings. It's about trust and mistrust, No matter what the Muslim brothers say, no matter what Morsi says, I really doubted that people really actually listen to what he says. No. There's a big chunk in the society that they just don't want to listen to what he says because no, I don't trust this guy. I don't trust this guy. I don't trust those guys. Look what they did. And look what they did. Under Nasser or under. Okay, fine. If you don't trust them and you don't want them, what are you prepared to do? Revolt against them? Against the very notion of democracy, and because also you don't forget they have been and they still are a force of the revolution. Yeah, a force of revolution that at a certain point of time it was inevitable, with which you will disagree on certain things, sure. But how are you prepared to settle those different things? It's up to you, and that's what we're going through.
Okay, we're rapidly approaching the end, but some people have had their hand up for a while, so I'm going to take a whole bunch of questions just so Yosri knows what's on your mind, and then come back to Yosri. This man here, and then this woman who's been waiting a long time, and then there's the two in white back there. I will come to you and to you as well. Okay, I have to go in order to who was up first. I'm really sorry because hands are going up, but we're running out of time.
Right.
And very short questions, please. We just want to do a ring round.
Right. The first question, as far as Egypt is concerned, is putting bread on the table. We haven't discussed that at all.
Yeah.
And the economy can implode this whole thing completely. What's your comment on that?
Okay, and the lady here?
You mentioned that Egypt had become polarized between the libertines and the Muslims. You also had Ahmed Shafiq coming through with about 46% of the votes. Where does this engine behind Mubarak, that was behind Mubarak, how does that fit in today into the structure?
How would it fit today?
Where is it today? I mean, you have, it's, the engine that was behind Mubarak is still obviously very much evident today in Egypt, with Ahmed Shafiq coming through so strongly. So where does this fit into the power struggle? Because you said it had become polarized.
Okay.
Okay, save that. The woman in the white and the man in the white. Everyone's wearing white tonight. Okay.
Well, I've heard the word fear a lot today, but my biggest fear is that I don't want to insult my own people, but that we as Egyptians are misunderstanding the revolution, and we are understanding it as being citizen is equal to having rights and no duties. So I'm afraid of my own people turning into strikers and people who just stop working for no good reason and expect to get something from the government.
Okay, and just pass it back to the gentleman standing up, and then we'll get back to you, and then another ring round. And you will, don't worry, and you're about to it.
Sure. It just kind of more or less really builds on the prior question, and my question is, beyond the conspiracy theories, the thirst for accountability, bordering kind of becoming vindictive at times, how do we liberals, moderates, revolutionaries, if you want to call them that, come together, not necessarily, appreciating the different ideologies, but set aside our egos and actually come together to work for a common cause? I hear people complaining about Muslim Brotherhood, the fear of Islamists, the change of laws, but there isn't much focus really on the diversified, huge numbers of political, liberal, moderate parties that really more or less are saying the same thing but are refusing to work with each other because of their own selfish or egotistic kind of means. So how do we really overcome that so you have a moderate party that can then start focusing on a more democratic country?
That's very interesting. Just, okay, this gentleman, and then you're there. I think next time they're going to want you to run for president. I've got them down. Don't worry, I've got them. Yes, but some of them are similar, so they all want you with
my question is actually related to this one. There's a parliamentary election coming up. You mentioned that this is a country and you should accept the fact that 30% of the people or 40% of the people are illiterate. So I have two roads to go down right now to win votes for what I believe in. I'm a secular, right-wing guy. Okay, what do I send money to Egypt to people to go give poor people bottles of oil? Because we can certainly play that game. Or do we start moving towards reforming things from the top down, not from the bottom up? So do we start talking about our number one effective tool, which is the media, and start getting channels, the air, not through a satellite dish, but ground channels, to start being sensible and to start having programs for people like yourself, so we can really start to communicate with the 40% who don't read or write effectively.
Okay, we'll go backwards. So someone wants, he's a secular right wing, wants some advice about how to, use this democracy as you've called about it. But from the back, someone, I think he described himself as a liberal, wants advice from you about it's what you talked about before, how Egyptians come together and overcome the differences.
Big question. I mean, and I will add it also to the lady there, the question that she posed. I hope that you don't rely on media too much, because my fear here, and I'm allowed to express one of my fears, since everybody did, is to go back to the idea that I believe is still with us. Some people believe that media can create a reality that's not there, or negate a reality that is there. And that's how Mubarak functioned. And also the army to a certain extent, at a certain point. When I wrote a piece in a newspaper after I suspended my program the first time around, I highlighted this because they thought that they can change reality through my show or the media in general. And my argument is, no, you can't. You just can't. So I hope that we don't approach such a magnificent aim like the one you expressed through ways like this. And I do believe that it's a multifaceted phenomenon, and multifaceted phenomenon necessarily take or would be best to deal with through a multifaceted strategy. So you work on the ground at the same time. You don't, because this is the longer challenge, to try and educate people and take them from the poverty, make them part of the economy, but at the same time you work on establishing the right basis for a solid political system. And I would like to link this to one of the questions that how do the different forces, liberal, secular, revolutionary, young people, whatever you call them, get together? I'm not really interested in them getting together. I'd like them to really, for them to understand what politics is all about. I remember interviewing Mr. Hamdeen Sabahi, who's a very good friend of mine, and who actually broke. He was the surprise of the first round. No, very few people gave him his true weight and what he represents, of course. And he came number 4 in the first round. Three, and then Abdelmanan Al-Futuh number 3. Sorry, 4.
Okay, let's get to the question. Sorry.
Let me just try and make this point first. When everybody was in the middle of this argument, everybody was shocked. Now we only have this, what? Either Mubarak or the Islamists, the Mubarak guy or the Islamists, and everybody. So I try to help people. And you're talking about 48% of the people. When you add what Sabahi got with what Abu al-Futuh got, and both are viewed as revolutionary, more representative of Tahrir Square. If they overcame their egos, that was, sure, but you can study it. But at the same time, in my opinion, neither of them, no one actually could play politics with the exception of the Muslim Brothers. Of course, they tapped into their long experience, underground work, organization, and made sure they, at 3 in the morning or like half 3 in the morning, I had already been on air announcing the results, following the announcement of the results of the second round. I was 6 hours on air, non-stop, until like half 3 in the morning. And Morsi was ahead by like 20 points in the beginning, and then started to erode until it became like 2 or 3%. This is when I left. But that moment, just as I was leaving, control room said, "We have the Muslim Brothers are holding a press conference now." I said, "Now, that's playing politics." Is it legal? Of course it is legal. They announced that we've won. Morsi has won, and we can prove it. Now play against that. And that, in the end, actually what put the Shafiq camp, including, of course, the army and people around them, all the intelligence apparatus, and also a big chunk of the Egyptian people, who either really liked Shafiq or they were really scared to hell from the other candidates. So I don't want to look at it that Shafiq was only the Mubarak guy. He was only, a lot of voting was punishment voting rather than, I went until the very last moment. I didn't vote the second round. I voted the first round myself. And until the very last second, not minute, as I was holding the pen, I had 3 names in mind. And then I closed my eyes and said, one of the revolutionary.
Okay, but your point still stands. But is there still a Mubarak machine? And then maybe to link the 2 questions, workers taking advantage, perhaps, or misunderstanding the revolution and not working, which feeds into the question about the economy, putting it on the table.
Well, yeah, of course, a big chunk of Mubarak's regime is still very much with us, driven primarily by fear. They don't know what's going to happen to them. Now, I think the more important question is not this, whether they do exist or not, because they do exist and everybody knows it. The big question here, in my opinion, is can we actually arrive at a certain deal with them? Can the society in general go into some sort of practice similar to what happened in South Africa? Because I mean, if you embark on putting every single one of them on trial, we're just going to spend the rest of our life until doomsday putting everybody on trial, and this is a road that it's not going to. So I think, in my opinion, this is whether or not you can bring them gradually to the idea that this is a different world, their interests, or at least part of them, could be protected under you if you are allowed to begin a new page in the history of Egypt. As for the economy, yeah, of course, the economy hasn't been doing very well since the revolution, but it hasn't been doing well not because of the revolution, and that is a fundamental point. So, if somebody tries to link the situation, the economical situation in Egypt, and how bad it is now to the revolution, I'll say sorry, I don't buy this argument, and I think that was one major trick that the regime has been using in fabricating crises, fuel and bread and gas and traffic, even traffic, and what have you, and so that people in the end hate the revolution. Of course, some people.
People who are striking, as she said, a lot of strikes all the time.
It will take time. You know, in one sense, I'm happy that people are realizing their rights and they're standing up for their rights. Of course, I don't agree with people not working for the sake of it, and I don't think that people will not work for the sake of it. If they are offered an alternative, if they feel that this is the way I see the world is very simple. It's as simple as this. If we have in Egypt and the Arab world have the slightest conviction in the principle that whoever works is rewarded, and whoever doesn't work is not rewarded, so many things will change. This is what it's all about.
Okay, we already have run over, and I apologize to people who put the hands up because I've had to. We have to be democratic here as well, since we're talking about democracy. So it has to be in order. This woman had her hand up for a very long time. I'm afraid we're. One question from the back, decide between the two of you, and then that will have to be it, because Yosri's taken and one microphone in the back, and then those will be the last. I'm really sorry. I know some hands came up later. People got interested and inspired, but there may be a chance to catch Yosri just before he goes. Please.
Okay. Maharisha, on a professional level, how accountable a journalist is to the line the institution he works for takes or adopts politically. And in your case, it is clear that on TV, Sawiris, the boss, who is very much against Islamist rule, he is giving disproportionate coverage to Syria, whose revolution is spearheaded by the Muslim Brotherhood. He is against in Egypt. Okay. And disproportionate to the coverage of what happened in Bahrain, including the crushing of Al-Lu'lu'a Square by the Saudi forces, and to Yemeni, who hundreds of thousands of people slept in the streets for months, and so on. And does concentrating on Egypt in your program protect you?
Okay, and the last woman back there?
It's on a much lighter note, actually.
We
nonetheless
like
very important.
Yeah. Still a joke.
One of my favorite things about your program is that often you used to end it with an arts or culture feature. So I just want to know why. Why did you
end tonight with an arts or culture feature?
You know, yes. I'm surprised that this is the first time I'm asked this question, because I deeply believe that this is a most important part of the revolution. I'm really heartened by all these talents of young people just springing up out of nowhere, and the change in the taste of so many Egyptians. I can't believe the fact that I've become a bit of a celebrity, and I'm saying this actually embarrassingly. Whereas the taste before the revolution was completely different. And you're talking about, I don't want to mention names here, And it's not about me, it's about the people and what they really want for the country. I can't believe that a show that starts at the prime time of 11 p.m. and ends at 2 a.m. can actually draw teenagers as young as 11 and 12 and old young ladies as old as 70 and 75 years old. This is my audience. These are my fans, by the way. And everywhere I go, and then all the. Because the thing is, people did not feel that they were part of their own country. People do not feel that this was their own country. People were alienated inside their homes, and once they see that's a new thing. I mean, we're talking honestly about our own problems. We're saying it out loud. We're not fearing anything. This is our country now, and that really once you begin to feel this, and you find all the talented. And that's why I dedicated usually Thursday on my show for those young people, and also in music and in acting, in graffiti. I mean, it's just like, wow. You go, you've seen them. It's just like, it's unbelievable. Where were they before? And it's if you tell me that this is not part of the revolution, I'm sorry. This is an integral. This is the revolution. The media thing.
And your specific channel, does Naguib give?
Maha is an old colleague of mine. We worked together for the BBC World Service Arabic at Bush House, which is
please,
really sad that.
Yes. Just answer the question about whether Naguib just said. Yes.
I thought I dumped it. Okay.
Yes. Does Naguib give too much attention to the issues he wants to promote? And
to his credit, you can believe me or not believe me. Naguib never really intervened in my program. And what I know about him is that he is a spontaneous guy. I love this about Naguib. Anything that he thinks of and he feels, is just out there. And that puts him in trouble every now and then. Okay? And he knows that. Sometimes he manages to contain himself, sometimes he doesn't. Now, he's just unlucky that the situation now in Egypt and the polarization atmosphere that we've been talking about now, some people can really hunt certain things for you and put you in trouble because. But do I think that he has bad intentions? No, whatsoever. I wouldn't have worked with him. Secondly, do I respect his position as a liberal who happened to be Copt, outspoken, effective? By all means. Did he panic after the second round? Yes. Did he try to impose certain things? As far as I know, yes. Did I try to do something about it when I felt that I couldn't do it? Yes, I suspended my program. Did he respect my position? Yes. Did he talk to me after that? Yes. And also the administration, and I was interviewed on a show of one of my colleagues, and I said things, what exactly happened, and I was surprised that the head of the channel phoned in and offered what, in my opinion, amounts to an apology. Yes, we panicked, we apologize, and things happen that sometimes you can't really define the editorial line it is. But because this is the idea, because it was all about the trust that people gave you, and I do believe that on TV, also some other colleagues and other channels tried for a year and a half to respect people and give them what they deserved. Trouble is, in our business, it takes years to build your credibility, and you can actually lose it in an hour. And that's what I was fearing, and what I didn't want for my show or my channel in general to do.
Okay. Okay, good.
As many times as it takes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last word, to the anchor of the last word. There was reports that Yosri Fouda had said, I'm leaving. I've done my job. Egypt has a new president. I'm leaving the show. But leave us with the last word. You're apparently not going to leave the show.
Right. Actually, that was the deal in the beginning. I'm a field guy. I mean, Charles knows this. Charles sent me to Bosnia and to Gaza, you know. And I remember actually one situation, if I am to say it. I was somewhere in Bosnia investigating the rape cases of Muslim women, because at the time the United Nations announced that there was about 20,000 women or so. In reality, from my sources, the figure was much bigger than this. And I did a story on it, and I sent it back to London, and Charles called me. Maybe he does remember, or does, I don't know. He said, Yosri Habibi, you were too emotional in your report. I said, how could you not be emotional in a story like this, Charles? He said, yeah, I appreciate it, but try not to be too emotional about the story. And that's what, listen, that, you know, you build on that. So I've always been a field reporter, and I really love this. I enjoy it. It's just because of the revolution what happened, and the pace of events in my country and in the region, that I couldn't afford doing what I used to do with Al Jazeera, you know, disappear for 2 or 3 months and come back with an investigative piece, an hour long or something. I would have lost a lot of the story. So okay, I agreed to appear almost daily, and we had to go around how do we go about it. And then at the time I announced that I will be doing this until we have our first elected president. Now that dragged on. And then I merely reminded people that 6 weeks from now I will be true to my word and leave the show. And it was really overwhelming. But I took the decision to stay on for 1 more year in a minute after they announced the results of the first round. I felt that I had my question, only one question to myself. Would I at one point or another feel guilty for leaving, and when I wasn't sure, I decided to stay on. So
well, I think what Yosri has been trying to tell us tonight, I think, is about people should be allowed to change their mind, and people should be allowed to of react to situations, which is what you've done. So we're not going to judge you on that. In fact, we're very glad you're going to say, and I'm sure Egyptians are very glad as well. And I think I speak for all of us that it's been really, really great having you here. I'm glad you still have some, but not all, positive memories of the BBC, and all of your colleagues and friends here. And I hope everyone will take away some of what you had to share tonight. It certainly made us all think, and that's the great thing about democracy.
Thank you,
Yosri Fouda.
Thank you, everybody.